All right, I'm backpacking solo in the Kahata Wilderness, and I got a lot on my mind. What's new? And I thought I would use this video to try and persuade you with logic and reason to buy more things used or refurbished or rebuilt. So maybe I can persuade you. If not, maybe I'll get you one step closer. And if you have differing reasons, leave them in the comments. I legitimately would love to hear them. Okay, quick backstory, then the persuasion. When I was in 8th grade, I hated school. I hated life. I was very unpopular. And there was basically two groups of kids. There was the jocks who were trying to sleep with girls and the nerds who were graphing on their calculator. And I was neither. And for Christmas, I wanted a mini disc player. MP3 players had come out, but mini disc players were cool, in my opinion. So my dad bought me one by Sony, which is the brand I wanted, but he didn't get me the one with the remote. And I was disappointed by that. And there was also a sticker on the back, a long gray sticker that said refurbished. And then there was some details about saying, you know, this item has been thoroughly inspected and cleaned and should work like new, blah, blah, blah. Well, I was very embarrassed by the fact that it said refurbished. I went to a private school. We were not the richest among our friends. I was already very unpopular. The last thing I wanted someone saying was like, oh, James is too poor to get a new Christmas present. So I took some acetone, I think, and I peeled the sticker off, and it looked exactly like brand new. So we get back from Christmas break, and another kid in my class who wasn't super popular, but more popular than me, he had also gotten a mini disc player for Christmas, and he had gotten the nicer one that had the remote. And as he was showing it off to his friends and I was feeling left out, I noticed that on the back of his was a big gray sticker identical to mine, and he had taken a Sharpie and he had scribbled all over it, also presumably out of embarrassment. So what I learned on that day is that I'm not alone. At least as a kid, I wasn't alone. That there's something a little bit weird about buying something used if you're not used to it. It can feel like you're second class. It can feel like you're poor. Anyway, I won't go into all the possible feelings. Oh, this is a steep grade. I've already done like 8 miles today. So anyway, here's what I want to try and persuade you of. That buying used makes sense almost all the time. There are exceptions, and I'll let you decide if you're in that exception. Maybe you absolutely need a warranty for a car or something like that. And sometimes there's no good secondhand market. As an example, Knipex pliers, they cost the same used as they do new. Okay, anyway, here's the first reason. It's way cheaper. Generally, when you buy something used, it's going to be something like 50% off. And if you go to estate sales, like I occasionally do on the last day of the sale, everything is 50% off. And in the last hour of the sale, they will negotiate like crazy. And the prices are already about 50% off. I have literally gotten Bosch, Starrett, and Snap-on items from last hour estate sales for literally 95 or 98% off. So almost pennies on the dollar. Well, I guess that is pennies on the dollar. Okay, it's cheaper. Second thing, you don't have to be a frugal miser with the money you spent. Go buy a second thing. Instead of having a brand new mountain bike, be the guy that has a mountain bike and a paddleboard. I'm not even trying to convince you to be unselfish or unworldly or non-materialistic. Take that money you saved, go to a nice restaurant, or buy a second mountain bike for your spouse or something like that. Spend it, but be the guy who has twice as much because he bought used. Okay, next one. Almost no one will know that what you bought was used after a month. Now, obviously, if you work with guys and you show up in a new truck and it's scratched and they ask you, where'd you get it? Okay, they're gonna know, they'll remember that. But for other things like mountain bikes, stand-up pedal boards, backpacking equipment, table saws, shoes, clothes at the thrift store, whatever, no one is gonna know. So all you're really doing is you're buying the thing in the condition that it would be in a month after you crashed with the mountain bike or you scuffed the top of the table saw or something like that. So why not get it over with and save a ton of money? Okay, next thing. It can actually be extremely fun going to shops that don't stock everything all the time like Walmart and Amazon. When you go on to Amazon and you search for something and it's there and you buy it, that's really not any fun. And that's okay, shopping doesn't have to be fun. But I'll tell you, when you go to a secondhand backpacking store, like a consignment place like in Chattanooga, or you go to an estate sale and you have no idea what's gonna be there, and there is just an absolute gem for next to nothing, it's so much fun. It's actually like how things used to be, where you couldn't always get what you wanted when you wanted it on Amazon and Walmart. It's actually really a thrill. Okay, next one. This is probably the most important for me because it has to do with character. You will be a better father, mother, spouse, sister, brother, friend, whatever you are. You will be a better version of that, and here's why. I don't care how patient you are. I don't care how non-materialistic you are. I don't care how much you love your kids. If you buy a $50,000 truck and you bring it home and your kid runs into it with a bicycle, you have to be a saint not to blow up at them. Even if you blow up with like righteous anger because they weren't doing what you told them to do, it is very hard to keep your cool when your brand new shiny things get their first scratch or dent or whatever. Now, I own a 2002 Toyota Tacoma. I paid $7,000 for it 8 years ago, cash, and it has 240,000 miles on it. We also own a 2010 Honda Odyssey. We paid $8,000 for it like 5 years ago, and we have 260,000 miles on it. So I practice what I preach, and I can tell you that both of those vehicles we bought, they had scratches and dents already. That's part of the reason they were so cheap, along with the mileage and all of those sorts of things. And when my kids have dented the door because they're kids and they have little biceps and it's windy, I just shrug my shoulders. Not because I don't care about taking care of stuff. I do. I'm meticulous about taking care of stuff, but because accidents happen and kids make more accidents than adults. And that's why they're kids and not adults. And if you want to be a good parent, set yourself up for success. Don't buy the fanciest, shiniest, nicest things and then expect that your child all of a sudden knows how to put his cup down on a nice glass table or something like that, which is fragile. Oh, is that a bear? No. Okay. Next one I already kind of touched on. You can have more things instead of having one hobby where you bought everything new. You can have more hobbies because you have more money to spend. The next one is, and this is specific with cars. I worked in the automotive industry for one of the big OEMs for 17 years. When a new car comes out, let's say a new engine, new headlight. Shoot. All right, well, that'll be funny to put on YouTube. When a new car comes out with new technology that's not been released before, there are lots of issues with it. I don't care if it's Ford, GM, Chrysler, Toyota, Nissan, Honda, Volkswagen, BMW, Audi. Doesn't matter. Here's why. Before they can release a new engine, they have to build a couple and put them on a test bench. And then when that goes well, they build a couple more, they put them in cars. And then they take them down test tracks and durability testing, and they try and speed up the customer ownership process. So they say, okay, well, we're going to drive this car 24/7 for 6 months, and that's going to simulate 10 years of ownership for the customer. Okay, that's great. First of all, that's not how customers use cars. So that's one problem. It's not a perfect simulation. They know that. They're doing their best. They don't want to wait 10 years to develop their new car. But the other problem is the fleet is small. Okay, so, how many F-150s do they sell a year? 1 million F-150s every year. They probably had 20, maybe 50, absolute maximum of prototype F-150s, pre-series F-150s in the R&D fleet that went to a hot climate like Arizona or South Africa and went to a cold climate like Alaska or Sweden and got thoroughly tested. So you have this very small fleet size. Well, the problem with that is if one of the F-150s, let's say they tested 100. If one of the F-150s had a failure, the engineers have no idea if it's a trend and it's going to happen to more, or if it's just a onesie, because they're normally hand-built cars. They didn't go through the normal process. They still don't have fully mature parts on them. They still have pre-series parts or maybe prototype parts, because the suppliers, they're ramping up their work too. And so you have a single failure out of 100 cars, let's say. And 100 cars would be a big fleet to release a car. But maybe Ford does that because they have so many F-150s. I only know the company I came from. Okay, so then you have a single failure. So then everyone shrugs their shoulders and say, well, it's a onesie. I mean, who knows? Maybe that car, maybe when they were washing it, the guy used the pressure nozzle and jammed it in the engine compartment, or who knows what happened to that car. It's a onesie. We're not going to put in a countermeasure to understand the problem. We're not going to take the time to understand the problem and put in a countermeasure because it's not worth it. Okay, so 1 out of 100 is 1%. So what's 1% out of 1 million? It's 10,000. All of a sudden, believe me, when there are 10,000 F-150 owners with the newest model year who have a problem, that's in the news. And yet, even if it did show up in the fleet of 100, it probably wasn't fixed. And if it didn't show up in the fleet of 100, because 100 is a relatively small fleet of test cars, considering they're going to sell 1 million of these things, gotta make sure I don't lose my way here, then the durability in the beginning is going to be bad. And that's why I always tell people the same thing. They always ask me, James, what kind of car should I buy? How should I do it? And I always tell them the same thing. Look, I'm not going to try and talk you into a brand. There's probably a brand you like. There's probably a model you like. I'm not going to try and talk you into a Mazda Miata when you want a pickup truck. What I do tell people is do not buy the first model year. When the new 2022 Toyota Tundra comes out, do not buy a 2022 or 2023. Wait until 2024 at least. Better yet, wait a few years. Now, you won't be the guy in the neighborhood who has the new truck. That's a bummer. Get over it. Life's not about impressing your neighbors. That's one of the wonderful things you learn as you get older. But what's going to happen is after 6 months in service or 14 months in service or 18 months in service, the Toyota warranty guys are going to start seeing failures in the warranty data and say, we have a problem at 16 months in service. The alternators are breaking up or something like that. And then what's going to happen is they're going to do a bunch of analysis. It's going to take time. And then they're going to hopefully find the root cause of that problem. They're going to put in a countermeasure. Maybe it's on the assembly line. Maybe it's in logistics. Maybe it's at a supplier. Or maybe they have to slightly redesign the part. Then they're going to implement that as soon as possible. That'll take time because they have stock parts that they have to deplete. It costs money. It needs to be tested just like the other part. And by the time 2024 rolls around, the parts and the car will be quite a bit better. So, why do you buy used? Well, when you buy used, someone else has already taken that vehicle or that lawnmower or whatever through a durability run. A durability run is when you use something for an extended period of time to try and discover if it's going to have failures when you give it to the customer. So instead of those weird issues where somebody at the factory installed something backward and it shows up for the customer, or there's something that needs to be redesigned, most of that has been taken care of and filtered out by the time the product gets in your hands if you wait a couple years and you buy it used. Okay, the other thing about buying used is, well, and this isn't so much used, this is more, well, it is used, but it's more about not buying the first model year. On the new 2023 or 2024 Toyota Tundra, guess who's got spare parts for it? Nobody. Guess who knows how to work on them? Almost nobody. Guess who knows what kind of failures there are? Nobody. Guess how much chatter there is on the forums? Almost none. In my former job, we bought a Rivian for, thorns, my goodness. We bought a Rivian for competitor analysis testing, and we had a problem with it. You couldn't find anyone on the internet chatting about it because there was only a couple hundred sold. If you wait a couple years till there's a couple 100,000 on the road and you Google your problem, almost guaranteed someone has had your problem and they've chatted about it. It's going to help you get your car fixed, and they might have revised the parts by then. So there's all kinds of advantages to waiting. The other thing is, I got my 2010 Honda Odyssey. I've gone to the junkyard a bunch of times and gotten parts. A deer ran into my car a couple months ago. I went to the junkyard. I'm gonna go over there. I went to the junkyard and got a whole door and a fender and walked out of there for 180 bucks. Okay, if that had been a brand new model, I would have had to buy brand new from the dealer. It would have cost thousands. So that's another one. Okay, the other thing, not so much for cars, although it applies to cars too, is like when you're, I got a bunch of thorns in my hand. When you're at an estate sale and you're looking over tools, you get to see them after they've been used for a year or two, that kind of thing. You get to see how the handle has held up. Sorry, I was pulling thorns out of my hand. You get to see how the handles on the machine have held up. You get to see how the rubber grips that they put on the hand tool have held up. You basically get a preview of which brands are worth buying. Because what you'll find is the really cheap brands, when you go to an estate sale, that putty knife or whatever from a cheap brand, it'll still be there, but like the handle will be ripped off. It'll be broken or something, or the overmolding on the handle will be tore off, but then you'll see the snap-on or something like that, and it'll still be in really good shape. So it's kind of like that commercial Subaru used to make, where they said, we have more cars on the road with more than 200,000 miles than any other manufacturer. It's kind of like that when you go to an estate sale and you start looking around. The junky tools, they won't be there anymore. They didn't last 5 years. They didn't last 10 years. But the high quality tools, they did. And so if you don't know anything about tools or backpacking equipment, that kind of thing, that's a really good way to learn. Maybe this is it. That's a really good way to learn on what stuff holds up over time. All right, I think I have a few more, but I'm already going at 18 minutes. I doubt anyone has listened to the end. If you did, thank you. I hope that maybe I convinced you a little bit. Maybe the last reason is, don't be a sucker. I mean, seriously, these manufacturers, they come out and they say, oh, this year's iPhone is just insanely better than last year's iPhone. It's like, come on. I mean, when the first iPhone came out, it was a huge step over the dumb phone. It was revolutionary, right? Every other step has been evolutionary. It's been minor. And yet these manufacturers lie to us. We're like sheep. We take it in. We believe them. We give them our money. Don't be a sucker. You know, stick it to them a little bit by waiting and not being the chump who has to have the brand new whatever it is that you're into. So I'm not exactly like a Rage Against the Machine and stick it to the man kind of guy, but there's a place for that. All right, folks, if you didn't like this, I understand. Give it a thumbs down so I know I won't make more videos like this. In the meantime, go check out AVE or Project Farm, those two YouTube channels. Those guys have they have a good head on their shoulders regarding products and tools and all of that. They know what brands are good, and they're not just running after the newest shiny thing. Meanwhile, I gotta find the trail. All right, take care. All right, bonus footage. I remembered one other thing I wanted to share, and that was when you buy something that's used and already a little bit beat up, especially if we're talking about like a car, you really don't have to worry as much about people stealing it. So if you park your old pickup truck next to a bunch of shiny ones and someone breaks in, you can pretty much guess the one they're gonna break into. And another easy example of that I always laugh at is Yeti coolers. You know, there's talk of Yeti coolers being stolen in the world, and I just think that's so funny, because if you have a $60 Coleman, you know, you don't even think about that kind of thing, you know. And so as you have more money and as you spend it and it's fun and all of that, I'm with you, but just realize that, like, you know, if you own the $700 cooler, not only do you have a cooler, you now have the anxiety of cooler theft. And that's just something that doesn't exist if you have the $60 cooler. And I think that that goes along with cars and houses and a variety of other things. So that's just one other bonus pro for buying used, scratched, and dented.